In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Well, we got there in the end. A day late, but coming up this week. What's it like if you're put in quarantine because of COVID-19? We talk once again about the latest developments on the island.
Quarantine now, they've been put in the hotel up there, which means that everybody is in a room of their own, locked in their room, the food taken to their door and the trays taken away. They're not allowed out, only onto their balconies. And this is what we mean by quarantine.
And on a lighter note, the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra is inviting everyone to enjoy a free streamed concert online tonight.
The idea is that we schedule by the officially scheduled concerts which we have in Nicosia, obviously elsewhere, but we cannot travel elsewhere. We use the concert dates as live streaming concerts for anyone who wants to listen to us online.
Well, I think we all know the basics now of what we should and shouldn't be doing about the COVID-19 and coronavirus, but we're joined again on the programme with our many thanks to virologist Peter Kariyannis to talk about the things that may be getting missed and other things that we should be doing. So we're mostly staying at home. Mm-hmm. We've been told not to go out unless we have to.
Yes.
But what about in the home? Keeping things clean and so on?
Well, within the home, provided that you do not have visitors and it's just the family, there's nothing else to do in order to protect yourself. The virus will not fly in. It's not transmitted through air. The problem is when you go out for shopping. I suggest that in a household only one person goes out at a time. They are meticulously careful what they do outside, who they talk to, who they touch, what they touch, particularly in the supermarket.
Supermarket trolley handles, for example. Now, I've seen in my local supermarket that they are regularly sanitising those, but you only need one person in between the sanitisations, don't you? And it could happen.
I would carry the wet ones with me, impregnated with disinfectant, and you can give it a wipe over before you touch it.
Okay, or should you wear those little gloves?
Or you can wear the gloves if you like, but then if it's contaminated, you will contaminate your gloves and then you will contaminate your shopping. So why not clean it before you touch it, and then you know that it's okay.
Right, let's talk about the quarantine conditions, because the last flights are coming in and they're going to lock down the island in effect, aren't they?
Yes.
But everybody who's arrived in the last 7 days or so and is still arriving is being quarantined. Now, I want to talk first about what's happened to the people who were brought in and taken up to Troodos, because we saw some horrific stories in the press about a lack of soap, a lack of toilet paper, a lack of all sorts of things.
Well, it serves them right, because the instructions were there not to fly in. They flew in without the certificates that were required, and they were expecting to be let out and not taken up there. So this left the government completely unprepared for the residences up there. They were not expecting to put people overnight up there. So,
well, sorry, when they said we're going to use these areas for quarantine,
yes,
surely if they knew people were going to be in there at some point, they should have stopped the place properly.
It was for self-isolation, which is slightly different from quarantine.
Okay.
So quarantine now, they've been put in the hotel up there, which means that everybody is in a room of their own, locked in their room, the food taken to their door and the trays taken away. They're not allowed out, only onto their balconies. And this is what we mean by quarantine. And now they're happy because they've got everything they need. And I was in a program the other day on television, and one of the students came on air and she said they were happy. and I asked specifically for lunches, dinners and what have you, and I was pleased to hear that they actually take them to their doors so they don't mix together at all.
Okay, and even couples are separated?
Even couples are separate.
Now, how long are they going to be in quarantine for? Because I
15
also
days.
read recently that the period at which the virus is active varies partly according to age, is that right?
Not quite. The incubation period is between 2 to 11 days. Median, 6 days maximum. So the fortnight gives us 3 days more as a safeguard. Having said that, only 98% develop the symptoms in that period. So there's still that 2% which might develop symptoms after the 14 days. So those will be problematic.
And how will you be able to measure that? Are you asking everybody after they leave quarantine to still, obviously everybody's social
Yes,
distancing, but have they got to take their temperature? Have they got to look out for symptoms?
Yes, they need to watch for symptoms, and the minute they develop symptoms to get in touch with 1420. But the safeguard here is that if some of them have been exposed before they came, by 15 days they are already well past the 20-day mark, if you see what I mean. They would not have been exposed on the day they arrived. So that gives us a bit of a leeway. And so far we haven't seen any of the people who have come out of self-containment becoming positive, which is a good thing.
But we have had more cases, and I think the Paphos Hospital in particular seems to be at the centre of things. Can you tell us about that?
That was a nightmare. First of all, they should not have allowed visits to somebody who was already in intensive care. So he had visitors from the UK. They seem to have passed the virus on to him, and then he passed the virus on to, I think, 9 nurses, 2 doctors and 1 domestic staff. And now the husband, a doctor of one of the nurses, has gone down with it. He works in a private hospital, and now the private hospital is closed. So this is a nightmare scenario which we should avoid at any cost.
How long will the hospital stay closed?
Well, the Nicosia General Hospital, who was the first one to close, the areas where the doctor there circulated, they are going to open on Monday. So that's a fortnight.
But we're still saying, are we not, that unless you absolutely have to go, for example, to the accident and emergency department, the first line of defence is always call your GP, isn't it?
Exactly. And this is the annoying thing, is that in Famagusta, for example, a person was taken to a private clinic there. She was found now to be positive, and she had travelled to the UK. And the instructions say, if you have travelled recently to certain countries which are listed, including the UK, Greece, Israel around us, I'm just mentioning the countries we have most contact with.
But we should add there that there is a list available, and there are constant updates. So
yes.
People ought to either go to the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There are lists there.
The web pages there, they list the countries. There used to be 3 categories, now there's only 2. And I'm sure quite soon there will be only 1 with the way things are going in Europe. In fact, China shouldn't be in the category 1 anymore.
They haven't had a case now for 2 days, have
they? Exactly.
So if you take what's happened in China and look at the, let's say, history of what happened, can you extrapolate any of that data to how it might affect us? Because the other thing that concerns me is we can lock down, let's say, for 2 months. But there's no guarantee, is there, that if we open up again after 2 months, there could be even a single person who could bring it back again?
This is exactly what I said on one of the television stations last week, and then the Minister of Tourism came on air and he agreed with me. In fact, what I said was that we might get rid of the virus by June, but we should be very, very careful who we let in and from which country, just in case the virus is reintroduced. And I think that at the moment the model we use in Cyprus is not exactly the same, but it's along the lines of that used by China. And from the European countries, Cyprus was the one that put rather in place the most severe measures as opposed to other countries. Look at what's happening in the UK now. They've woken up after a fortnight. It's going to be very, very tough there. But we hope if we didn't have these mishaps, if I can call them mishaps, carelessness with the virus entering the hospitals, then we would have been in a much better situation still.
Do we have the beds if we need them, and do we have the ventilators, and indeed, most importantly for the health sector workers, the right gear for them to wear? Because I think China was shipping some in because we were short.
China is shipping some in as we talk. There is, of course, enough to cope at the moment. I was at a private hospital yesterday. They've ordered quite a lot, and the Chinese have obliged, as they told me. So at least China is opening up its factories to satisfy the demand from the rest of the world. And as far as respirators are concerned, there is, I think, 127 at the moment. They are getting another 10 from Israel, and they've voted another 10 from Switzerland. But the Swiss ones will not be here until the middle of April. Hopefully we will not need them.
And hopefully at least there will be in the hospitals for any future need, because it's not just this particular illness that requires them.
As for personal protective equipment, PPE, I think we have enough at the moment. Masks, goggles, whole body suits, overshoes and what have you. There is enough supplies there.
And we should again emphasise, because people keep saying this, there's no need to wear a mask, really, is there? Unless
outside, yes.
Yes. I mean, you see people driving around in their cars with a mask on, and I'm thinking...
They look ridiculous.
So when should you wear a mask?
If you're sick, to stop you from spreading the virus around.
But otherwise, just sort of keep your reasonable distance.
Keep your 2 meters distance. Safety radius of 2 meters away from anybody, even when you're queuing up at a shop.
Let me ask you one other thing. We've seen pictures in the local press of workers disinfecting the pavements. Now, I found that a little extraordinary, or am I being silly here? You don't touch pavements, do you?
That's over the top.
So it's no good at all?
It's no good at all. I mean, in a country like ours, where hopefully in another couple of weeks the sun will be heating the tarmac to sort of melting point, that will not be necessary.
But does it do any good now?
No. We don't have a problem now, so why do it? I can understand it in places where there's a lot of people milling around, like waiting rooms, in stations like the underground, for example, where ventilation might not be very good. I can understand it in buses, and they're doing it here in buses every day now.
Yeah, but the pavements is a little bit over the top.
Yes, it's over the top.
I'm glad I didn't miss that one, because I did think it looked ridiculous. Yes. Peter, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and let's hope we don't have to do this again in a month or so, because hopefully everything will be under order.
Yes. Thank you very much for asking me to talk.
That is Peter Karayannis, virologist, bringing us once again up to speed on what we should and shouldn't be doing to protect ourselves and other people. That's the thing we tend to forget from the coronavirus.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
Pretty well most of Cyprus is self-isolating or certainly social distancing as the coronavirus continues. And a lot of people are finding novel ways to try and keep us occupied and entertained. Among them, the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra, whose artistic director and chief conductor joins us now, because they are going to start streaming chamber music concerts online, because they've had to cancel, of course, their scheduled concerts that would have gathered a lot of people together. So Jens, where did this idea come from? I mean, we do see, if you look online, all sorts of pop stars and artists and whatever, they're all coming together to try and find ways to not only continue with their creativity, but to entertain other people who are sitting at home stir crazy, let's be honest.
Yes, well, this idea derives from basically the notion that even though we cannot gather people in the theaters anymore because the theaters are officially closed, even though the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra is, despite of its small size, still large enough to be considered a large group of people, we cannot gather as an orchestra. So I came up with the idea that we break up the orchestra into groups of individual musicians, some of them just showcasing themselves and their instrument and their artistry, whereas others gather in a duo or a trio or a quartet maybe, like I do with our principal bassoon player Giovanni Galletti. So we take security measures, but we do not stop our actual mission for the country. And that was something that I wanted to try to keep alive as long as we can and are able to and are allowed to. The idea is that we schedule by the officially scheduled concerts which we have in Nicosia, obviously elsewhere, but we cannot travel elsewhere. We use the concert dates as live streaming concerts for anyone who wants to listen to us online. This means that anybody in the country from anywhere can log on to the Facebook site we have. And there is a wonderful thing in modern technology, and especially in Cyprus. The usage of Facebook is so spread and so popular that we have many followers. I think it's over 11,000 actually. I don't know how many in Cyprus, but the official number is that high. That we actually can reach quite a number of people who want to log in or log on rather onto their Facebook account and listen to us play for them from their homes.
Now, the first concert, and I'm assuming, because we don't know how long this lockdown will go on, I'm assuming that there will be more, but the first one is Saturday, 21st of March. All being well, that'll be tonight if I manage to get this podcast up in the morning. And that is going to be done at the Palace Theatre, but if people go to the Facebook page and look for the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra, you'll be live streaming, basically, as a lot of people do.
Exactly, that's what we are doing, and we also have invitations and alert banners on our website. So if you go to our website, which is www.cyso.org.cy, you actually will find an alert banner which can lead you to our Facebook site, from which you can then enjoy the streaming.
And that will start at 8:30, am I right?
Exactly. It starts at 8:30 at night at the usual concert performance starting time.
Right, now then tell us a little bit about the concert. You mentioned the bassoon player, but there are others. You're on the piano, I think?
Yes. So we start with a very small group, which is just 3 people from the orchestra, but others are already at home preparing for the next scheduled concerts coming up. Again, in parentheses, as long as we are allowed to maintain this kind of reduced routine. But what we will do in the beginning is Angelos Angelidis, our sub-principal clarinet, will introduce his instrument to the audience. We consider this somehow also as an, I would say, in-depth introductory into our professionalism, into our activities. In this case, one instrumentalist, one player from the orchestra, doesn't just simply perform, but also talks about the nature of the instrument, the functionality of the instrument, and so forth.
So it can be an educational tool, in
Exactly.
fact, particularly possibly for youngsters who are studying
That as
music
well.
and so on.
Exactly. And Angelos Angelidis will do this in Greek, but still there is a lot of pieces to listen to. There's a total of 5 pieces he will be performing throughout a time of, I would say, approximately 20 to 25 minutes. And after that, Mr. Giovanni Galetti, our principal bassoonist, and myself will play the piece by Carl Maria von Weber called Rondo Ungarese, Hungarian Rondo, actually written by a German composer. But the idea is that there is a certain kind of color and connotation to the music which comes from Hungary, which this composer tries to capture. But this is not really necessary to know. What is really captivating in that piece and in the performance is the bassoon is an instrument which always plays in the back of the orchestra, is not absolutely visible. It's a large instrument and not always highly exposed. In this case, we truly expose the bassoon. You can see it from very close up. I think even closer up than you would be able to see it in a concert performance if you come to a chamber concert, because we have the cameras. And there you can see, and this is, I think, the most intriguing part of the performance, how virtuosic and how technically arousing this instrument can be, and how equal it is to many other solo instruments we already know.
Right, and so let's wrap up with what's upcoming. You said that other members of the orchestra are practicing, rehearsing at home. Have you got any specific dates coming up, and who will be playing?
Yes. So our next scheduled concert is the weekend of 2nd and 3rd of April, and on the day which is the Nicosia concert day, we will do our next live streaming. We're preparing for this already. And many, many musicians in the orchestra have brought to me their suggestions for chamber performances. So we will compose a program out of all these suggestions to fill about an hour or more. This time, tonight, on Saturday evening, 21st of March, our first one will be slightly shorter due to the fact that we had a short notice change and we just had to really set it up fast. So this is why we just have 3 people and 3 instruments being exposed. Now we're aiming towards a longer performance, and this is for the beginning of April, and then again on Friday 10th of April again, which is the Friday before Easter time.
And we're hoping, but of course we don't know whether or not things will change in time for Easter, but in the meantime, look for the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra's webpage or find them on Facebook and join in the joy of music, bringing everyone together in these difficult times. And that was Jens Georg Bachmann, who's the artistic director and chief conductor of the Cyprus Symphony Orchestra. Now, my apologies for the fact that not only is the podcast a day late this week, it almost didn't happen at all because, as we've mentioned earlier, pretty well everything in Cyprus is locked down. That means I really can't guarantee whether or not I'll be able to manage to put together a podcast next week, but I'll keep you posted on the Facebook page of the Cyprus News Digest. In the meantime, just let me say, stay safe and wash your hands. Have a great weekend. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.